Welcome to this Jets Overtime special brought to you by Moody's.
We're going to put our heart in on. That's one thing about a New York Jet. We are a blue-collar operation. And listen, only thing we know is how to go to work. And that's all we're going to do.
What we're going to look for in certain players at certain positions, but just high level, it's guys that love football, physical players, smart, tough, like just establishing an identity.
There's a number of things that has transpired over this first month of being the head coach. The things that have been most, it's been important to me is the conversation that me and Mougey just had about this roster, about the coaching staff, the scouting department, and the conversation that I've had with our ownership group. And I'm excited. I'm excited for the forward thinking of this group and what we're going to do as a team. So we're here to win now, and we're looking forward to it.
Welcome to Jets Overtime. Our free agency preview is presented by Moody's. Eric Allen alongside Quincy Enunwa. The Jets have a new leadership team in place in GM Darren, Mougey, and head coach Aaron Glenn. They're also going to be looking for a new starting quarterback in 2025 after announcing their intentions to move on from Aaron Rodgers. Quincy, Mougey has said all options are on the table for the Jets at the position.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, that is the most correct decision for this team. You want to start over. You want to have an opportunity to figure out what your team looks like. And so you have a guy on the roster right now in Tyrod Taylor and two young guys as well. How are they going to compete and perform on this team? You also got to look at free agency. There's some quarterbacks out there, and we know from history so far that it doesn't matter what the past decisions of the quarterback have been. How can you perform now that you're in a new team?
Tyrod has, quote-unquote, been a bridge quarterback in the past. But if you look at his career statistics, 28-1 as a starter, so 500 as a starter, he's always protected the football, and he also can keep plays alive with his feet.
Yeah, and that's an important part, right? I think when you have a run game like the Jets have, three great backs, right? Three guys that can also do different things. You want to make sure you're keeping the ball in your hand and giving it to them. So if a quarterback is not turning the ball over, it really allows you to be really explosive. One thing about this offense that we saw last year in Detroit was that it's a very play-action heavy pass team. So if you can really focus on that run and make sure you're not turning the ball over, you can really get some big plays.
If the Jets do indeed choose to address the position in free agency, what do you make of this group overall?
Yeah, so the history doesn't always matter, right? We looked at guys like Geno Smith, we looked at guys like Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, all guys that had some revivals on new teams. A lot of the times it's about the coordinator. How can you make this guy, get the most out of this guy? Because that is the biggest thing. Sometimes you're just not in the right space. So if you can bring a guy in and have the confidence to give him what he needs, you might see a revival from another quarterback that's out there.
You've been diving into the film already, taking a look at what has made Detroit so successful. When you're talking about Engstrand, what do you think he's going to be looking at that he wants from that spot? You mentioned play action passing, and a lot of people think the Jets are going to be under center a lot more in 2025.
I can definitely see that. I think one of the big things is you look at Tanner Engstrand, he has a very similar path to Ben Johnson, right? He started as a passing game coordinator, then he became the offensive coordinator, right? So you're going to see a lot of those similarities, as well as they both really were very integral in Goff's success. It wasn't just Ben Johnson, because Engstrand was there at the same time. So we're going to see something very similar to that. You want to bring a quarterback in that might be a project, but a guy that you know has all the skills for this offense. It's going to be a lot of 11 personnel, so a lot of receivers are going to be out there. We got to bring some guys in, right? You know you have Garrett Wilson, who's going to step up as well. You drafted a guy last year. You got to bring in some more guys, but I think that's going to be important, as well as the tight end play.
No matter what happens, the Jets have to have multiple plans of attack, not only at quarterback, but at all positions throughout free agency.
Absolutely. That's going to be very important. We know that there are a few spots on this team that we want to see them fill in, defensively. Obviously, we can talk about interior defensive line. But offensively, I think you need a tackle. You need a tight end, right? Because you may or may not be losing some guys. You need a guy that can go out there. Two tight ends, honestly, would be great, to really help this run game get going. I think last year we had some great backs, but we didn't get a chance to really see them perform. If you can put that in this year, it's going to be a different offense.
Man, did you look at my notes? That's a great segue, because coming up here, we're going to be talking more offense on our free agency preview presented by Moody's.
This segment is brought to you by Moody's, a proud partner of the New York Jets. Welcome back to this Jets Overtime special brought to you by Moody's.
What did you learn about Tanner Engstrand over the years you spent with him, and what made him be the guy that you wanted to call your plays on offense?
Very, very smart. was a huge part of that Detroit Lions offense. He's going to do a really good job for us. He was the passing game coordinator there. And it's time for him to be a coordinator, right? He's paid his dues.
Our offense in Detroit was something special to watch.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of hands that was in that to make it that way. There are a number of good players, offensive players on Detroit's staff, from the running backs to the receivers to the tight ends. And it was his job to make sure, how do I feed all these guys? Yeah. And he gave that information to Ben, and then Ben put together as far as calling it. So Tanner had a huge hand on how we operate in Detroit, man.
Quincy, Tanner Engstrand followed Aaron Glenn from Detroit to the Jets. Last season, the Lions were known for having a dominant offensive line, running the football, and getting their playmakers the ball in space.
Yeah, and with this team now, the Jets already have a pretty solid offensive line. It's all about the playmakers now, right? You got to bring in some playmakers. But one thing that the Detroit Lions did a very good job of is they were great in the Yak game. And the Jets have a guy called the Yak King already.
Not only do they have the Yak King, but they also have Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. Now, as we look at the Jets' offensive free agents with expiring contracts, what are your thoughts on right tackle Morgan Moses and tight end Tyler Conklin?
Yeah, Morgan Moses is a guy that was really solid for the Jets, right? Coming off an injury, but really performed well when he was out there. The offensive line position has been really mangled the last couple of years. Guys switching all over the place with injuries, but he was a guy that when he was in, he was really solid, a centerpiece for that line, and an OG, a guy that you need. Now, as far as Tyler Conklin, man, that guy is a great pass catcher, a great route runner, a guy that you really like to put out there. And so it'll be unfortunate if we can't keep these two guys. They're gonna have to find out where they can, replace that talent.
Let's bring in Caroline Hendershot right now. What can you tell us about the offensive market and free agency?
Well, EA, you guys mentioned tight end and right tackle as some of the positions of need for the Jets, but there's also another position. With Davante Adams being released from the Jets roster, I'm thinking they could be looking at some wide receivers. So Marquise Hollywood-Brown is an intriguing name for me because Aaron Glenn emphasized speed at the combine. He said it's what everyone's looking for. So why not go after a wide receiver who ran a 4.27 40-yard dash at his pro day in 2019? He was hurt for the majority of last season, so teams potentially could get a talented player at a lesser price too. But you guys mentioned tight end. Let's think of someone that has familiarity with Aaron Glenn. That, to me, New Orleans tight end Juwan Johnson. He was signed as an undrafted free agent to the Saints when Glenn was there in 2020. And in my opinion, an underrated aspect of Johnson's game is that he transitioned from a wide receiver to a tight end in the NFL. So he has that skill set of both positions. Also, I'm just saying, doesn't hurt that he is a New Jersey native. And lastly, while Glenn emphasized Tippmann and AVT as young pieces on the Jets offensive line, you guys brought up Morgan Moses being a free agent. So if the Jets choose to explore the market for right tackles, Jedrick Wills is an interesting name to watch. He was the second tackle taken in 2020. He played right tackle all throughout college and then switched to left tackle with the Browns. So that versatility will be very attractive for teams on the market.
Great job, Caroline. Where do you rank these needs right now on the offensive side of the ball? You got quarterback, tight end, receiver following the Davante Adams release like Caroline just talked about, and then right tackle.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm being honest, I think quarterback is always going to be number one. But after that, I think tight end is very important, especially with this offense. Then after that, number three is definitely going to be receiver. I think when you lose a guy like Davante Adams and possibly a couple other guys on that squad, you're going to need some guys to kind of fill in those spots. And I think with this offense, you want to have as many weapons as possible. So tight end, receiver are just as important.
All right, you got to have weapons on both sides of the ball. Don't go anywhere because we're going to talk defense and free agency coming up next.
Learn more about how to join the Jets in London with an official ticket and travel package by visiting onlocationexp.com/JetsLondon. That's onlocationexp.com/JetsLondon. You are watching a Jets Overtime special brought to you by Moody's.
Listen, Steve's been a guy that I've been knowing for a while. Great defensive mind. Been a head coach, somebody I can lean on when I need questions about being the head coach. And he's going to do a hell of a job for us. Aggressive, sees the game exactly like the way I see it when it comes to defense, and that's one of the reasons why he's my defense coordinator.
Steve Wilks is a straight shooter. He doesn't pull any punches with anybody, and it is what it is. And I think that's what players relate to more than anything. Players don't like to be lied to. Players want to know the truth, even though the truth sometimes can be hurtful, all right? But the thing is, at least they know exactly what they got to change. But I would say this, it's not just giving players the truth, but it's also giving them a solution on how we're going to fix it. And he does a really good job of that. And those are some of the things that we have in line, right, when talking to players. He's been there a while. He's been a head coach, which is important for me when I have questions, right, for what he's been through. So I'm looking forward to those questions to him.
Q, here's something we do not have any questions about. Aaron Glenn and Steve Wilks are going to get after the quarterback, and they're going to blitz a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. While in Detroit, Aaron Glenn was the second highest blitz-rated team in the NFL. That's insane, right? So you're talking about a team that's going to bring that pressure, and not just on first down or third down, but also on second down. That was actually their highest-rated time that they blitz, and they love to do it out of nickel. So you got to bring some guys in that can go out there and attack the quarterback.
As we look at the Jets' defensive free agents right now, team MVP, Jamie Sherwood, he is an expiring contract. I also have the secondary circle because the Jets have 4 safeties who are about to become free agents, including restricted free agent Tony Adams, and then DJ Reed, who played opposite Sauce Gardner the last few years. He's going to be coveted out there as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, they did a lot of blitzing in Detroit out of nickel. So you want to have as many DBs as possible. Guys that are versatile, inside, outside, can rush the quarterback, can run and get in the backfield and in the run game. So it'll be exciting to see who they go pick up.
All right, let's bring in Ethan Greenberg. Greens, what's out there on the market?
Well, let's take a look at the safeties first because like you detailed, the Jets have 4 safeties set to hit the market. And when you look around the league, Dolphins safety Javon Holland, he's considered the big fish. Now, there's system familiarity with Ifeatu Melifonwu, who's played with the Lions each of the last 4 seasons, but I want to highlight Justin Simmons because Darren Mougey, the new GM of the Jets, was with the Broncos when they selected Simmons in 2016. We're talking about a 2-time Pro Bowler, 4-time second-team All-Pro, and even though he's 31 years old, perhaps Aaron Glenn would want a player like this to help install a culture on defense. And one position you did not mention that I have circled, that's defensive tackle. And the splash here would be Milton Williams from the Philadelphia Eagles. He had an incredible postseason run. And again, you're looking at system familiarity considering who could be available. Levi Onwuzurike and Javon Hargrave. Onwuzurike played with the Lions last season. That connection is obvious. Now, Hargrave played for defensive coordinator Steve Wilks in 2023 with the San Francisco 49ers. He's 6'2", he's 305 pounds. He made the Pro Bowl that season under Wilks and had 7 sacks, and he only played in 3 games this past season, so maybe he'd have the discount sticker where a team could buy low. And one more position, I know this doesn't seem like a need considering the top-end talent on the Jets roster, but it's never a bad thing to have more pass rushers, especially with Jermaine Johnson coming off an Achilles injury, so I'm looking at the pass rushers and the edge position. An intriguing name here to me is Chase Young. Obviously, he has the pedigree of a top pick out of a top school, and standing at 6'5", 265, he has a very similar build to someone the Lions added to Aaron Glenn's unit last season in Marcus Davenport. Davenport, 6'6", 265, and for what it's worth, he's also a free agent.
Thanks, Greens. What's the most pressing need when we talk about defensive tackle, perhaps linebacker, depending on what happens with Sherwood, definitely safety, and then maybe CB2. Because Brandon Eccles is also unrestricted free agent.
Yeah, definitely. Honestly, I think it's all about the trenches. That's the most important thing. I actually listened to a podcast the other day with Sauce, and he mentioned how difficult it can be to cover when you don't have a guy in the trenches that can really stop the run and the pass. So I think it'll be important to bring somebody out there to really take the load off those DBs back there.
That's the defense, but don't go anywhere because coming up, we're going to play a little game we like to call Make Your Case.
This segment is brought to you by Moody's, a proud partner of the New York Jets. You are watching a Jets Overtime special brought to you by Moody's.
We look for smart, tough, aggressive, and resilient players. All right, we're going to do everything we can to find those guys. And listen, you can find them in all different spots, small schools, big-time schools, trades. Wherever we can find them, we're going to try to bring them on this team.
Q, Aaron Glenn is looking for winners. What do you think about the culture he's trying to instill here at One Jets Drive?
It really makes me excited, right? Because I feel like when he goes out there, it just feels like it's football when he's talking to the media. And that really gets you fired up, makes you want to put a helmet on, strap it up, and make some plays for him.
He is authentic, he is competitive, and he is ready to get back after it with the team that drafted him in 1994. Now let's bring everybody in for a little game that we're going to call Make Your Case. We're going to select a few players here from our virtual deck, and you all are going to tell me why this player is a good fit for the Jets. And it's going to start with you, Ethan. Jevon Holland, the safety. Why would he make sense for the Jets?
So I feel like I'm pretty lucky on this one, but Jevon Holland obviously fills a need at safety considering who's a free agent from the Jets roster. He's 25 years old. He's a versatile piece. Most of his snaps come in the back end at safety as a free safety. He's lined up in the box a ton, has familiarity in the nickel as well. And you take a look at what Aaron Glenn had in New Orleans and Detroit. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson with the Saints, Brian Branch with the Lions. Both of those guys, versatile chess pieces. Jevon Holland can be that piece for the Jets. I know AG isn't calling the plays, that's Steve Wilks, but AG did say that he and Steve Wilks view defense through the same lens, so Jevon Holland fits a need, and he'd be a good addition to this Jets secondary.
Before we get to Caroline, what do you think about a Dolphin swimming north?
Well, listen, a lot of guys like to stay in the division, so it would make sense for him to jump over here. And, I think he'd be very welcome over here.
Okay, Caroline, the Jets here with your virtual selection re-sign Jamien Sherwood. Why does that make sense?
Now, Ethan said he thought his was easy. I think mine's even easier, honestly. Like, bring Sherwood back. He's young. He's only 25. And last year, we really got to see what he was able to do skill set-wise as a starter. He's familiar with the other players on the defense. They followed his cues last year as Mike linebacker, so they're familiar with him. Plus, he has the exact type of mentality and character that AG preaches. He's team first. He plays full speed all the time, and I think he's only going to get better. So Sherwood, I think, will have a lot of suitors on the market, but I definitely think the Jets should be one of them.
Yeah, he was the team MVP last year. Quincy, when you're looking at a guy like Sherwood, how do you anticipate him in this market, and how many suitors potentially could he have?
I mean, honestly, he was the leading tackler in the league, one of the leading tacklers. So he's going to have a lot of people that want to bring him over here. But I think as a player, a lot of times you want to stay close to home. So it makes sense for us to sign him back up.
Okay, Quincy, how about you? You're going to the secondary, I think, actually, with your selection. How about Carlton Davis?
Yeah, Carlton Davis. So listen, I love that we're all going defensive. You got a defensive head coach. Why not go with defense? And I think this is the perfect guy. He knows the system, and maybe still Steve Wilks' defense this year, but this is a guy that's familiar. But also, one of the biggest things is when you have a new system, a new regime, you want to have guys that know how to win. This guy is a Super Bowl winner in Tampa Bay, so it's a guy that's not only familiar with the defense, can play inside and out, but he also just knows what it looks like to win.
Greens, how about that pairing, Davis and Holland?
Well, I think that two welcome additions in this scenario, and you think about what the Jets would have on the outside at corner in Sauce Gardner and Carlton Davis, both very long physical corners, and it also fits a need.
In this scenario, I have Justin Fields. I like it because Fields was 4-2 as a starter last season with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He had 5 passing touchdowns, just 1 interception. He had 5 touchdowns on the ground. This guy is a true dual threat. Throughout his career, he has averaged more than 50 yards rushing per game. Just a couple years ago, he had 1,000 yards on the ground. He played collegiately with Garrett Wilson at Ohio State. And the other thing is, he's not a finished product. He's just 26 years old, so he's got a lot of room to develop. And finally, I would love the dynamic in the offensive backfield because the Jets are going to put more emphasis on the run of not only having Fields, but Breece Hall and a couple young studs behind him in Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis. What says you, Caroline?
Yeah, I mean, I love that pick, EA, because the mobility that Justin Fields brings to that quarterback position is so vital. You talked about the familiarity with Garrett Wilson. That's going to be a huge thing for him as well if he were to land here. And also 26 years old. I think the key with free agency is you're always trying to find a talented player and then continue to develop them in your offense or defense. And that could be Justin Fields' future.
Thanks. Nice job, everybody. Get your shopping bags ready because free agency is set to begin. Thanks for joining us.